I spend so much time on my blog talking about exercise for POTS because I think that there's a lot of pushback against exercise in the chronic illness community and its impact that it can have on your symptoms. A lot of people seem to be getting upset by their doctor saying you should just exercise or exercise would help you. And while exercise may not be the key to curing everything, there is definitely a role for exercise in anybody's health maintenance. And so for that reason, I actually get pretty upset when people say that there's no way exercise is possible for me with POTS. There is definitely a role for exercise with anybody with POTS. Even if you are bedbound or unable to move, there are definitely forms of exercise that you may not be thinking of as exercise, but are ways you can actually improve your muscle tone or even cardiac ability by not even leaving the bed because everyone's starting from a different level. So if you are bedbound or if you are in a wheelchair due to POTS, it might not be possible for you right now to be running a mile or even walking 10 feet, but it might be possible for you to take a water bottle and do a couple arm lifts with that. There have been so many stories of people who do have extremely debilitating POTS who were stuck in their beds for years at a time who now are actually doing someone even can be running. But they don't really get from bed to running in one day. They get from bed to running over months and sometimes even years. I definitely do not think that my POTS will be alleviated anytime in the near future, but I do think that I can have better symptom relief and a better quality of life from exercise on a day-to-day basis just from the Levine protocol alone over the next few months and years. I would like to run again. I think that would be a great thing. I think I'd probably cry if that ever happened because I used to be loving to run. Whenever I was stressed or excited by something, I would go run, and that was my way of relieving stress. And now that's been taken away, so I've been trying to figure out other ways to get around that. And if I could run again, I think that would be an amazing thing. But no, I do not think that that's going to be happening in the next month or maybe even the next year or 2 years. But I have to start somewhere. For me, starting with the Levine protocol was pretty brutal. I came back I was actually diagnosed with POTS 2 days after I came back from living in India for a year on a Fulbright trip. And so for me, POTS was a very immediate thing. I didn't have POTS one week, and then I had POTS the next week, and suddenly I was going to have a heart ablation, and then people were thinking that maybe something crazy was happening, or maybe I was just crazy. Who knows, because it was happening so fast. But after I was given the diagnosis in the hospital, they said, okay, well, here's your options. You have medication, which a lot of people take for POTS. You need to drink more water, which I do. Salt up, which I do. Compression for sure. But the biggest key that they always stress is exercise. And when I first heard that, I thought there is no way that this girl is going to be getting on an exercise bike right now because just from going to the bathroom while I was in the hospital, the nurses would burst in and see if I was still okay because my heart rate was going over 100 BPM difference sitting to standing just by going to the bathroom. That was crazy to me, and it seemed ridiculous that I would be getting on any piece of exercise equipment anytime in the near future. However, my brother's a physical therapist, so he was really excited by the POTS diagnosis as much as I was very depressed by the POTS diagnosis because he said, well, at least there's something that can be done about this. And he immediately went home, printed out this 20-page protocol, and just threw it on my bed and said, see, look, it's going to be awesome. Don't worry, Heidi, it's going to be great. And a year from now, it'll be totally different. And all the doctors kept saying that, oh, okay, if you actually commit to this exercise program, it will be different. We've seen night and day differences, but it is hard. It is definitely one of the hardest things you can do to improve your POTS is the exercise protocol. But I do think that the exercise protocol has the potential for the greatest long-term relief and maintenance of POTS symptoms because it's targeting those symptoms at a more fundamental level than what medication does, because the medications are just kind of more tackling the symptoms. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with taking medications to alleviate POTS symptoms. I mean, that's why I'm taking ivabradine, so that I can live alone and be able to do more things by myself and exercise more and eat more. So there's so many ways that ivabradine has improved my life. But I do not think that just taking more ivabradine is a substitute for not exercising. And at first, I thought that the exercise protocol was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my whole life. They wanted me to try the exercise, the recumbent bike. I got on that. They put on an EKG lead because I do have SVT that was being triggered daily, multiple times a day. So they wanted to do that. They put it on me. I barely even made it through 2 minutes before they told me to get off because they thought that they were seeing VTAC on my EKG, which is crazy that barely pedaling in a circle can cause that much stress on your body. And after those 2 minutes, I was put on the floor and laying there for the next 45. I thought there was no way I was ever going to get to even 10 minutes on this bike if I could barely do 2 minutes. And so we actually had to start from the very beginning. There's a exercise machine that comes even before the recumbent bike, which is called the New Step. And it's actually an elderly favorite. And I have to admit, it's probably the best exercise machine on the planet because it's just like a seated stepper and you can go so slow in that thing and just have such a great time. So that was my first 2 months with the Levine protocol was basically on the new step. But a lot of my problems with exercise, I think actually was my mindset about it. I was so stressed by doing exercise. And I understand that it is terrifying because I was terrified myself. I was so stressed out, even now when I change different exercise machines, like when I go from the seated stepper to the recumbent bike, from the recumbent bike to the rowing machine, and even now going from the remote rowing machine to the seated upright bike, that is terrifying. And my heart rate is so high the first 2 times doing these because I'm just afraid of what's going to happen. It is horrifying and it feels so awful when you are losing control over your senses pretty much when you're exercising on these new machines. And so I definitely felt that level of anxiety. But something that I really liked about my PT center is that this PT center is actually for cardiac pulmonary rehabilitation. And so a lot of those patients there actually have cystic fibrosis or lung transplants or heart transplants. So no one in there was doing crazy things, trying to be the best of the best. We were just trying to live. And we really bonded over that. And also, they had different counselors to help you with overcoming those fears of exercise or even overcoming those feelings of loss and how to live with chronic illness. So I often would meet with a counselor before or after exercise for an hour just to walk through what happened. What happened that day while I was exercising? I was really nervous, but why was I nervous? It went well. Or it did go well, so what can I do next time? Maybe starting some deep breathing exercises. Because my POTS is so triggered by adrenaline and anxiety, or anything that produces adrenaline, I had to make sure that I could keep that on lock because that is one of the biggest things that will prohibit me from getting where I want to go. So working on those with a specialist really helped me move past that fear of exercise with POTS. Of course, I'm not going to be going out at that time running or walking in the heat, and I was definitely exercising with the guidance of a physical therapist. It was a one-on-one session. I would never recommend someone just trying the Levine protocol on their own without their doctor's approval because you don't know where your heart's at, you don't know where your whole body is ready for something like that. And so having the physical therapist there with me for the first few months was definitely something that made me feel safe in trying out this new program. So now actually I exercise mostly from home. I have a gym membership and I exercise from home. So if I can't drive one day, that's fine because I can still work out. Or if I can drive, I'm going to go to the gym and practice working out in public. That is a huge stressor for me. And actually, my heart rate while working out in the gym is definitely about 15 BPM overall higher than if I work out at home. But I think it's a good practice. It's a good way for me to retrain my brain saying, it's not that scary. You can do this. Because if I can stand up and wash my dishes for 45 minutes, I should be able to bike in a gym for 50. It's because it's a recumbent exercise, but it is hard to get past that mentally sometimes. So I do go to the gym for weights and also practicing on the machines that are a little bit harder. And then and for those, I take someone with me, my mom usually, and that way I'm not exercising in a dangerous situation. But I also go to a gym that makes me feel more comfortable. So I go to one of those hospital gyms. So everyone there is actually a patient, or most of them are patients, and a lot of them are in cardiac rehab. So it's just me and a bunch of elderly people in cardiac rehab, but it actually makes me feel so much more comfortable because I'm not in some gym where everyone's just like, oh, let's go, like bigger is better, but rather we're all just slowly biking in a circle. Like this sounds like a great experience. So yes, the Levine protocol is hard. I didn't really have a choice about it. My family just said, this is what you're doing. There is no if, buts, or ors. You have to go. I think I only missed or canceled twice ever for health reasons in the past 2 years for physical therapy. So I just showed up every time. My mom made sure no matter what happened, I showed up. I showed up. I cried sometimes. I was on the floor immediately. I don't even know what was happening, but I was there. And that's the hardest part, is showing up. So for me, that was incredibly important. And I'm so happy that my family was super pressed me into doing this, because it's been the number one thing to help my POTS symptoms, is focusing on that deconditioning aspect. And speaking about deconditioning, I know that a lot of people get really upset when they talk about POTS due to deconditioning, and especially athletes who say there's no way I'm deconditioned because last year I could run a marathon. I would like to say that I also was hiking massive mountains in India the month before I was diagnosed with POTS, and I am incredibly deconditioned. If you look at the research, you actually lose a ton of muscle mass just by being in bed for a week. And so deconditioning is one of the greatest kind of consequences of being in a more immobilized state. And so if you have POTS or a chronic illness that does limit your mobility, I would be very worried about deconditioning, because deconditioning will exacerbate your POTS. And so if you are laying in bed to, avoid that tachycardia or fainting, which makes sense. I mean, I have those days too, but there are, at a certain point, those days are going to build up, and the deconditioning is becoming so severe that that mountain to climb to get back over that in recovery is going to be so difficult. And that's why I think there's so much resistance against exercise for POTS, because this has been so difficult to build up. But I do think that most people, if they're cleared by their doctor to do it, can do it. It's just that it takes so long, and you have to have patience in yourself and in the process to make that happen. It's taken me 2 years to get to month 4 of the Levine protocol. Okay, month 4. I've been stuck on month 4 for 6 months. I don't think I'm going to be done with month 4 for another 6 months, and maybe not even a year. But that's okay, because I know that this process has worked, and it's worked for me. And I think that no matter who you are, it is important to think about, how much can I do to protect me from getting more disabled in a way, to the level that I can with exercise. I mean, for some people with POTS, it might take, maybe right now is not the time to start this, but it definitely needs to be in the conversation of, how can I prevent myself from getting weaker? Because the weaker you get, the harder it's going to be to live with POTS. So how to do that. But that's definitely something to talk with the physical therapist, because especially a cardiopulmonary person, because they've seen people out there worse. They've seen people who can barely breathe walking 10 feet because they're waiting for a lung transplant. So they know that it's a struggle, and they know all these tips and tricks to getting through that, but they will also make sure that you're not going to push yourself too hard. And that's another problem, when you push yourself too hard with the Levine protocol, then you're going to have some relapses because you overstress the system. So it's this really delicate balance of slowly pushing yourself to do something better, to get more strength, but then also not overdoing it and putting yourself in a worse situation. So Levine protocol, definitely into it. I definitely think it's a good idea for everyone to at least talk about it with their cardiologist, as well as get a professional opinion about how to implement this plan with a physical therapist, because it's not something you should just take and do at home without some idea about how to do this safely with POTS. So check that out. Don't get so discouraged. I know that a lot of people really are against exercise, and I completely understand the pushback on that, and I understand 10,000% the fear, because I'm still afraid. It's been 2 years and I'm still afraid sometimes, so I understand that. But it is something that it would really benefit your health overall and in your journey for recovery with POTS. So try that and see what happens with your cardiologist. And in the next video, I will be talking about how I implement those exercises, as well as what do I use to do it safely at home, safely at the gym, what your person should know if they're going to be that kind of a spotter for you, because they need to know what to do in case it does, if you do pass out. There's always the potential for has to just kind of go wrong. But as long as you have someone with you who knows what to do, then it's definitely a safer environment and you can keep going on your path. So check those out. Below are some articles to read more about this and what I have found that it's helped me in different ways that it's helped me. And hopefully you'll read this. And if you have any questions or comments, please comment. Hope to talk to you guys later and look forward to hearing any kind of conversation about this. See you.